At the end of her shift, the waitress thought she was alone, until she caught that familiar gaze from her toxic ex-boyfriend, the one who had abandoned her before. But when she noticed the biker standing at the door, ready to protect her from any threat, her heart nearly stopped. Maybe, just maybe, a biker could change her life. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Aaliyah sighed, wiping the damp cloth over the glass's surface for what felt like the 100th time that evening. Her fingers slid slightly on the glass, almost trembling, as she glanced at the phone left on the counter. The diner's yellowish light seemed more intense than ever, highlighting every worried expression she tried to conceal. Outside, the night was silent, broken only by the occasional sound of cars passing on the empty street. She stepped back and checked her phone, its notifications flashing like a constant reminder of her worries. Marcus's last message made it clear. He wanted money. Fast. With each demand came a threat, always veiled, but terrifying. A chill ran down her spine when she saw his name on the screen. Pressing her lips together, she tried to convince herself she would be okay. All she had to do was stay calm, at least until the end of her shift. The diner was slow that night. Empty tables mirrored a tranquility that didn't match the rapid beating of Aaliyah's heart. While a few patrons finished their meals, she forced a smile and continued working, determined not to worry anyone. Every chair bore the marks of worn-out metal. Every table bore the imprint of stubborn stains that refused to fade no matter how many times they were wiped. The old tiled floor creaked underfoot. Still, the place held a certain warmth, something that almost made her feel. Just as she started to hope Marcus would, at least for the night, content himself with sending messages, a loud group of bikers pushed through the door, filling the air with the scent of leather, gasoline, and freedom. 6 or 7 men in heavy jackets entered, laughing and talking as if the world outside didn't matter. Aaliyah set the cloth down on the counter and adjusted her apron, flashing an automatic smile to welcome them. Most of them gathered around a large table near the wall, but one man with a sterner expression broke away from the group and approached the counter. His posture was firm, his gaze intense. His leather jacket was more understated than the others, adorned with an emblem Aaliyah didn't recognize. "A strong coffee, please," he said in a low voice, the timbre resonant and steady. Aaliyah nodded, trying not to show her nervousness as she grabbed a clean cup. She didn't know his name, but when their eyes met, she felt a strange sense of familiarity, almost a flicker of empathy. It was unusual for her. Normally, she was good at keeping her distance, especially from strangers, but there was something calm about him that sparked a flicker of curiosity. As she prepared the coffee, her co-worker approached and asked quietly if everything was okay. Aaliyah responded with a small smile and whispered that she had it under control. Her co-worker remained unconvinced but refrained from pressing the matter. Everyone at the diner feared Marcus, or, at the very least, had seen his hostile behavior toward others. Confronting him was risky. When she handed the coffee to the biker, she noticed his hands, calloused and strong but careful as he held the porcelain mug. Before she could say anything, her phone vibrated in her pocket, and her stomach sank. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Excusing herself hastily, she moved to a less visible corner of the diner to check the message. Another demand from Marcus. "If you don't give it to me, I'll expose everything. Believe me, I have proof." She took a deep breath, shoving the phone back into her pocket. The last few customers were finishing their meals, and her co-worker was switching off some lights while cleaning nearby tables. Almost closing time. The clock on the wall read 10:30 p.m., but Aaliyah felt as though the weight of the night had already consumed her. Then, the same notification sound broke through the stillness. "I'm swinging by. Don't keep me waiting." That was all it took to set her heart racing. She walked back to the counter to busy herself with anything, but her gaze landed involuntarily on the man drinking his coffee. He looked up at that exact moment, and their eyes locked for a second. It felt like he could sense her tension. She tried to raise her eyebrows in a shy smile, but it came out more like an embarrassed plea for help. He remained calm, paid for his coffee, and slid the empty cup to the edge of the counter before returning to his friends. He said nothing, but Aaliyah felt a strange sense of reassurance in his deliberate movements, as if he was always aware of his surroundings. She didn't know this man, but something about him told her he wasn't there to cause trouble. Oddly, her shoulders relaxed slightly. The diner emptied out quickly after that. The biker group kept their voices low as they talked and laughed, seemingly unbothered by the world outside. Aaliyah continued wiping the counter, her eyes darting occasionally to the glass door. Outside, the streetlights cast a dim yellow glow over the desolate street, where not a soul could be seen. It was the kind of night where anything, or nothing, could happen, depending on fate. A sudden screech of brakes in front of the diner shattered the stillness. Aaliyah recognized the car immediately. Marcus's old vehicle, which always heralded trouble. He entered without hesitation, his expression dark and his stance aggressive, something Aaliyah knew all too well. Wearing a dark jacket with the hood pulled up, his eyes scanned the room until they landed on her behind the counter. "Thought you were going to stall me again," he said, striding toward her with determined steps. His voice cut through the diner's quiet like a knife. "Where's the money I asked for?" Aaliyah's knees weakened. She tried to control her breathing and speak softly, hoping to diffuse the tension. "Marcus, I can't give you anything today. I've already explained. Once I get paid, I'll try." He stepped closer, leaning against the counter with a menacing glare. "Try? What am I supposed to do until then? You think I can wait? You think my bills just disappear? I'm done with this. You owe me for everything I've done for you. Now it's your turn to help me. Got it?" Aaliyah wanted to shout that it was a lie, that she was paying off debts that weren't even hers. But saying that in front of everyone would only escalate things. Still, she couldn't stop the tear forming in her eye. The intensity of the scene had drawn the attention of the bikers. Some of them subtly stood up, while others fixed their gaze on the confrontation. The man who had ordered coffee, she would later learn his name was Chase, rose quietly but didn't intervene immediately, likely to avoid escalating the situation. Aaliyah noticed his movement from the corner of her eye. Marcus slammed his hands on the counter, the sound reverberating through the diner, keeping everyone on edge. "You think I don't know what you've been up to? Playing the victim, pretending to be the good girl?" he growled, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. The diner fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the faint tune of an old song playing on the radio. Aaliyah's face burned with shame. Her co-worker cleaning the tables retreated, too scared to get involved. No one wanted to provoke Marcus. His volatile nature was well known. "I'll take care of it, okay?" she said, her voice trembling but attempting firmness. "I just need more time." "Time's not something I have," Marcus sneered, his tone dripping with disdain. "And you won't have it either if you keep stalling me." The tension in the air was palpable. Then, one of the bikers broke the silence. "Hey man, she said she can't do anything right now. Why not cut her some slack?" Marcus turned sharply, glaring at the man who had spoken. The atmosphere thickened like smoke. Aaliyah feared he might lash out at the bikers, but Marcus simply scanned them, sizing them up, before turning back to her. He exhaled heavily, as if trying to restrain himself. "This isn't over," he spat, heading for the door. "And tell your little friend to stay out of my business." He cast one last scornful look at Aaliyah before storming out. The sound of his car engine roared outside, and within moments the tires squealed as he sped into the night. Aaliyah's breathing gradually steadied. Her heart still pounded, and her palms were sweaty as they gripped the counter. When she finally mustered the courage to look up, she saw Chase watching her, his brow slightly furrowed in a mix of concern and solidarity. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, trying to convey that she was fine, though knowing deep down this was only the beginning of a long struggle. The bikers began preparing to leave, the tension dissipating slowly. Aaliyah whispered an apology, her voice shaky, and returned to wiping the counter as if she could erase the memory of what had just occurred. Her co-worker approached, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, but said nothing. Everyone in the diner now had a story to tell about Marcus, the troublemaker who had disrupted the night. As Aaliyah tried to find a sliver of inner peace, her mind raced with desperate thoughts. Would he come after her later? The questions swirled, making her nauseous. Yet, amidst the turmoil, she found herself thinking of Chase's attentive gaze. He knew nothing about her, yet he had been ready to stand up for her if needed. Aaliyah wasn't used to anyone stepping in to defend her. Marcus had promised security in the past, only to turn it into threats. She almost felt guilty for accepting any kind of help, but deep down, a glimmer of hope surfaced. Maybe this didn't have to be her reality forever. Her throat tightened, and she let out a long sigh. She needed to close up the diner. She needed to go home. She needed so many things, she no longer knew where to start. Looking around, she checked to see if there was anything left to clean or any orders to serve. Everything seemed in place despite the strange tension lingering in the air. The lights dimmed one by one, and her co-worker counted the register. Outside, the night maintained its silence, a silence that roared. Her eyes drifted to the door, where the group of bikers dispersed into the night. Chase lingered, calmly fastening his helmet, his leather jacket slightly open. He glanced in her direction. Aaliyah felt a slight tremor in her legs but couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the fear of Marcus, or maybe it was the relief of knowing that, at least tonight, someone had noticed how much she needed help. Finally, Chase and his friends departed. The rumble of their motorcycles echoed down the empty street until it faded. Aaliyah locked the door and let her shoulders slump, gathering what strength she had left. Her co-worker was already heading to the back room, signaling the end of their shift. But Aaliyah knew there was no real end, not while Marcus loomed. This reality consumed her from within. She removed her apron, pocketed her phone, and let out one last exhausted sigh. Another night like this awaited tomorrow, and the day after. She took a few steps toward the counter to grab her bag, trying not to think about what would happen when she stepped outside alone in the dark. But the shadows outside seemed to take shape, reminding her that Marcus could reappear at any moment. She turned, switched off the diner's interior lights, and stood motionless in the dim glow for a few seconds. What she didn't notice was that, in the distance, someone watched her through the glass. Maybe it was just a curious passerby, or perhaps one of the bikers ensuring she was okay. There was no way to know. But the truth was, that silent night held more questions than answers. Finally, Aaliyah unlocked the door and stepped out, freezing when she heard a car driving slowly by. Her heart leaped, thinking Marcus had returned. Nothing happened. The car moved on, and she forced herself to take a deep breath and cross the threshold onto the sidewalk. She needed courage to keep moving forward. Still, she wasn't free of the threats that lay ahead. Deep down, Aaliyah knew that even though Marcus had left for now, the storm wasn't over. Whether those bikers would stand by her or not was something only time would reveal. When she realized no one else was around, save for her co-worker walking down the side street, Aaliyah took one final breath and let the adrenaline subside. The night crept by slowly, but with each heartbeat, she felt that nothing would ever be the same again. Strangely, that thought sparked a faint glimmer of hope. Aaliyah still felt her heart racing. The sound of Marcus's car fading in the distance seemed to echo in her mind, but she knew he could return at any moment. She had to finish her shift, even though her legs were trembling. Her co-worker had already left, but she stayed behind to clean the counter, organize the cups, and make sure everything was in order for the next day. The silence inside the diner now felt heavier than ever. As she wiped the counter with a damp cloth, her eyes kept darting to the glass door, fearing Marcus might appear there again, his gaze filled with threats and demands. The oppressive feeling made it hard to breathe. That's when she realized she wasn't alone. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed one of the bikers still lingering, adjusting his wallet inside his leather jacket. He was the same man who had silently sipped his coffee earlier and seemed to pay attention to the argument. He approached the counter with calm steps. "How much is it?" he asked, pulling a bill from his wallet. She grabbed the notepad and quickly calculated the cost of the coffee and the other items the bikers had ordered. His voice was almost gentle, a stark contrast to his firm posture and rugged outfit. "$10.50, she replied, trying to sound normal, though her throat was tight from the lingering tension. He placed some bills on the counter but didn't take the change immediately. Instead, he leaned forward slightly and asked, in a tone that bordered on genuine concern, "Are you okay?" Aaliyah wasn't sure how to respond. On any other day, she might have made up an excuse, maybe an automatic smile, something like, "I'm fine." But after Marcus's sudden outburst, it was hard to hide the sadness in her eyes. To avoid his gaze, she lowered her head, putting the money in the register as she tried to seem indifferent. "Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for asking." Even without looking directly, she could feel the weight of his stare, as if it said, "I know you're not okay." He noticed her evasion, but didn't press further. He simply said, "Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me. What happened earlier? It wasn't right." She gave a slight nod and pretended to check her notes again, even though everything was in order. When she looked up, she realized he was still watching her, but with respect, not intrusion. Nervously, Aaliyah cleared her throat. "Thanks, but I'll manage." He nodded briefly, took the change she handed him, and tucked it into his jacket. Before leaving, he gave her one last concerned glance. Then, he opened the door and joined the other bikers waiting outside. Aaliyah heard the roar of their engines, and within moments, only the faint sound of a distant siren broke the stillness of the night. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the sincerity she'd seen in the stranger's eyes. Something about him left her confused, almost vulnerable. She continued cleaning, quickly gathering the few dirty dishes and washing them. The clock on the wall showed it was nearly midnight. Normally, she would have closed the diner earlier, but Marcus's disruption had thrown off her routine. With no one around, she finally felt a wave of exhaustion settle on her shoulders. She realized she was trembling slightly and had forgotten to put on her coat to keep warm. Or maybe it wasn't the cold. It might just have been the nerves. Briefly, she remembered how things with Marcus had started so differently. She thought of when he was attentive, even sweet, surprising her with little gestures that filled her with hope. But over time, everything fell apart, and the accusations, debts, and shouting replaced any tenderness that once existed. The fear she felt now was like a constant shadow. After closing the register, she grabbed her bag and headed for the door. She peered through the glass before unlocking it, making sure no one was outside. But as soon as she stepped onto the sidewalk, she noticed a car parked at the corner. A chill ran down her spine. It was Marcus's old car, or at least it looked a lot like it. She couldn't be sure from that distance, but it was enough to make her hesitate for a second. It could just be paranoia, but she knew that old model with its slightly dented body all too well. Panic rose in her chest, making her breath almost ragged. She took a few steps forward, trying to keep her composure. As soon as she moved, the car turned on its headlights, flooding the street with harsh light. Aaliyah froze, clutching her bag tightly against her body. Then, the car sped up and turned the corner, disappearing from sight. She didn't see who was driving, but she was certain that if it wasn't Marcus, it could be someone he knew. She needed to get out of there. Walking quickly, she turned onto the side street that led to the bus stop. It was a 15-minute walk. Every time she heard the sound of an engine, she glanced back, afraid she might see him. Cold sweat broke out on her skin, even in the cool night air. Her phone vibrated. When she checked, Marcus's name lit up the screen. She chose not to answer, but the messages followed quickly. The first read, "Don't ignore me. I know where you are." The second was even worse. "If you take too long, you'll regret it." Aaliyah's stomach churned. She wanted to cry but held back the tears. She couldn't take it anymore. She thought about calling the police or asking for help, but what proof did she have that they would actually do something? Even if she tried, Marcus always found a way to come back and scare her. And frankly, she didn't feel strong enough to face all the consequences. Finally, she reached the bus stop. The street was almost deserted, except for a stray cat rummaging through a trash bag, which scurried away when she approached. The streetlight flickered, as if it was about to burn out, adding another eerie touch to the night. Aaliyah sank onto the metal bench, clutching her phone to her chest. The minutes stretched endlessly as she waited for the night bus, which, according to the schedule, would take at least 10 more minutes. As she tried to calm herself, her thoughts wandered. She pictured Marcus's face in her memory, shouting things that made her feel guilty for problems that weren't hers. She tried to shift her focus and ended up thinking about the brief moment when the biker, that stranger, had asked if she was okay. He barely knew her, but it seemed like he saw something everyone else missed. Could it be safe to trust someone like that? The bus finally arrived, bringing a gust of warm air as the doors opened. She boarded, swiped her pass, and sat at the back. The city seemed to be sleeping, except for a few tired-looking passengers lost in their own troubles. Throughout the ride, which lasted just over 15 minutes, Aaliyah kept checking the windows, expecting at any moment to see Marcus's car following her. She got off near her home, in a modest residential neighborhood where the houses were small and the dim streetlights often failed to adequately light the sidewalks. In the adjacent streets, she could hear an occasional dog barking. With every step, she looked around, searching for any sign that she was being followed. Her building was old, with peeling paint and a creaky iron gate. As soon as she entered, she locked the gate and hurried up the stairs to the second floor, where her apartment was located. She opened the door with trembling fingers and only felt a small sense of relief when she turned the deadbolt from the inside. Sighing, she tossed her bag onto the worn-out sofa in the tiny living room. She took off her shoes and headed to the sink for a glass of water, wishing the night would just end. The apartment was tiny, but it made her feel minimally safe, or at least it always had. Tonight, though, everything felt scarier. Every creak of the furniture, every drip of water, every noise from outside sounded like a prelude to Marcus knocking on her door at any moment. Aaliyah tried to convince herself he wouldn't come so late, but who was she to guess? She sat on the edge of the bed, running her hands through her hair to relieve some of the tension. She thought about telling someone what was happening, maybe her co-worker who had always discreetly offered help, or even the diner manager to see if there was a solution. But fear held her back. Marcus had made it clear that if she tried anything, he would handle it his way, and that always sounded terrible. She turned on her phone to check for more messages, and a notification popped up instantly. "If you need help, let me know. Chase." For a moment, it took her a few seconds to realize it was the biker's name. Her heart raced. Somehow he had gotten her number. Maybe it was on the diner's receipt. Maybe one of his friends had given it to him. It didn't matter. The surprise came with a small surge of relief. Someone cared. She almost laughed nervously because nothing in her life seemed to be under control. Yet here was a simple message, standing out against all the chaos she'd been facing. Amid threats, violence, and debts, there was also someone willing to extend a hand. It didn't mean she would accept it. Deep down, she feared dragging another person into her mess. But she couldn't deny that, for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. Aaliyah placed the phone on the nightstand. She looked at the bare walls of her room, where strange shapes formed from water stains. She needed to rest, but she knew sleep wouldn't come easily. She got up, turned off the light, and in the dark, her thoughts returned to Chase's firm expression and genuinely concerned eyes. She sighed again, feeling an almost imperceptible relief settle on her shoulders. Even though her fear of Marcus hadn't dissipated, and would likely worsen, That message reminded her she wasn't entirely alone. She lay down, hugged her pillow, and allowed herself for the first time that day to smile faintly. Maybe, after all, there were more people willing to help than she'd imagined. She closed her eyes, whispering a quiet prayer that the night would pass without incident. Aaliyah woke up before the sun had even peeked through the buildings. The alarm on her phone hadn't gone off yet, but her restless, shallow sleep had prevented her from finding any real rest. Still lying down, she grabbed her phone and saw a flurry of messages from the same sender. Marcus hadn't let up. Between furious warnings and taunts, he made it clear that he wanted money immediately. She scrolled through the messages, reading each of his threats. A tightness in her chest lingered, following her like a persistent shadow. She turned over in bed, staring at the ceiling of her small room. Her thoughts wandered to the day before, the glances she had exchanged with Chase, and the simple message he had sent offering help. At the same time, she remembered Marcus's enraged expression when he appeared at the diner and the mysterious car that had followed her nearly all the way home. She needed to be strong, but how? She got up, her muscles heavy, and headed for the shower. The warm water ran down her body, but it couldn't wash away the tension that clung to every pore. After her shower, she sat on the edge of the bed to get dressed. She picked up the note she had saved with Chase's name, or rather, the message from him on her phone, and reread those few words, unsure if she should respond. She felt torn. Marcus was becoming more aggressive by the day, but involving someone else seemed dangerous. Perhaps it was better to keep her distance. She grimaced indecisively and left the phone on the nightstand without taking any action. Almost time to leave, she packed her apron into her bag, checked that everything was locked up, and headed off for another day of work at the diner. The sun rose timidly, painting the sky in shades of orange. It was going to be a hot day, but Aaliyah didn't feel any comfort even in the mild warmth. Inside her, everything was an icy sea of uncertainty. She arrived at the diner a few minutes early. She was so accustomed to scraping together coins to avoid missing rent that, out of fear of losing her job, she was always the first one there. She entered, greeted the cook, and began setting up the counter. Shortly after, her co-worker arrived. She had been worried since the previous night, having witnessed another tense scene between Aaliyah and Marcus. "You look awful, girl," her co-worker whispered while placing clean cups on the counter. "Did you get any sleep?" "Barely closed my eyes," Aaliyah admitted, her gaze dropping with guilt. "But I'm here, hanging on, or almost." Her co-worker didn't push. She just gave Aaliyah's shoulder a gentle pat, silently offering support. Aaliyah took a deep breath, finding a faint thread of comfort in that unspoken solidarity. The morning passed relatively calmly. The diner was busiest during the early hours, with customers coming and going for coffee and fresh pastries. Aaliyah kept busy behind the counter, serving each order with a timid smile, trying to suppress the gnawing feeling that something bad was about to happen. Around 10, the diner's phone rang. Her co-worker answered it, but after a minute of conversation, she gestured for Aaliyah to take the call. Hesitant, Aaliyah picked up the receiver, immediately recognizing Marcus's voice. He didn't bother with formalities. "So, where's my money?" he snapped, his tone low and irate. "You think this is a joke? You should have made the transfer already." Aaliyah swallowed hard. She felt a chill run down her spine but tried to maintain her composure, knowing that some customers were close enough to overhear if she spoke too loudly. "I told you, I don't have it. At least not yet. I'm doing my best," she whispered, cupping the receiver with her hand. Marcus let out a mocking laugh. "Doing your best? Is that supposed to be funny? Do you have any idea how much trouble?" Her face flushed with a mix of anger and shame. She constantly blamed herself for the decisions that had trapped her in this mess, but never had the courage to completely break free from him. "Look, I need to get back to work. I can't talk right now." He cut her off. "I'll be there later. Get ready, because this time the conversation won't go like the last one." Marcus hung up before she could respond. Aaliyah put the receiver down with trembling hands, silently grateful to be behind the counter where no customers could see her pale face. A sudden urge to drop everything and run filled her. But where would she run to? She needed this job. She had bills to pay. Fear was a noose tightening around her neck. Hours later, the diner door opened and 2 men in leather jackets walked in, followed by a third. Aaliyah instantly recognized Chase, with his blend of casual calm and alertness. He and his biker friends found a table and sat down as if they just wanted a quick bite. But she noticed a brief glance from Chase in her direction. There was no smile, only a contained look of concern. She served their table with a nervous energy. Her hands were sweaty, and at one point, the tray almost slipped. One of Chase's friends noticed but didn't say anything. Aaliyah silently thanked him for not bringing up Marcus. Discussing him wasn't on her agenda. She wanted to keep that secret, though she knew it wouldn't stay hidden for long. "Thanks," Chase said as she placed a glass of juice in front of him, his eyes fixed on her. It was just one word, but it carried a world of meaning. She replied with a soft, "You're welcome," so quiet he might not have heard it if he weren't paying close attention. The atmosphere between them was odd. He seemed to know a little of what had happened the night before, but she didn't want to drag anyone else into her problems. Still, it was comforting to sense that his concern wasn't born of mere curiosity. It felt like a commotion drew everyone's attention. The cook entered the diner looking tense and pulled Aaliyah's co-worker aside to whisper something that made her eyes widen. Moments later, the co-worker approached Aaliyah. "You won't believe this. Someone left a weird note on the manager's windshield." Aaliyah froze for a moment. She didn't need an explanation to guess that it somehow involved Marcus or the people he owed money to. A chill ran through her, but she summoned her courage and rushed to the door, her heart pounding. Outside, in the small parking lot next to the building, the diner's manager stood by his car, holding a crumpled piece of paper. He looked both angry and confused. Aaliyah approached cautiously. "What's going on?" He handed her the paper, letting her read it for herself. The message was crude, written in large, uneven letters. "Pay up, or we'll collect another way." No signature, no explanation. Aaliyah's stomach dropped. The threat was undoubtedly meant for Marcus, but without knowing which car was his, it had ended up on the manager's vehicle. Or worse, perhaps they knew she worked there and wanted to scare her. Either way, she couldn't explain this to her boss without exposing her ties to Marcus. "Does anyone know what this is about?" the manager demanded, furious. "They're messing with the wrong person if they think they can intimidate me. I don't owe anyone anything." Aaliyah opened her mouth to speak but couldn't find the words. Her boss's face was red, and behind him, her co-worker looked at her as if begging for an explanation. She shrugged, feigning surprise like everyone else. She wanted to cry from the tension but held it in. The manager crumpled the paper angrily and marched back inside the diner. Aaliyah followed, and her co-worker whispered in her ear, "You have to do something. You can't let this guy ruin you like this. It's gone too far." She didn't respond, pretending not to hear, as her mind spiraled. This was just another sign that Marcus was deeply entangled with dangerous people. She returned to the counter, stowed the tray, and tried to take a deep breath. She wanted nothing more than to curl up and disappear. The memory that haunted her most was the first time Marcus had used her name to open a credit account. Back then, she had forgiven him, reasoning that it was just a temporary loan. Little did she know that it would spiral into a vicious cycle of debt, scams, and manipulation. Just when she thought the day couldn't get worse, Marcus walked in during the late afternoon. His usual scowl was plastered across his face, his bloodshot eyes narrowed. He stormed straight to the counter, ignoring the customers and staff. "No more games, Aaliyah. You know why I'm here. If you don't give me what I want, you'll regret it." His voice was loud enough for the entire diner to hear. The sound of clinking utensils and cups ceased as everyone turned to watch. Aaliyah's cheeks burned with humiliation. She swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. "Please don't do this here," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper, lacking conviction. He slammed his fist on the counter, rattling the cups in the display case. "I don't care where I am. I'm done being ignored. I want the money you promised me, now!" She took a step back, nearly knocking over a salt shaker behind her. She felt the weight of everyone's stares. Some customers shrank into their seats, unsure how to react. Her co-worker emerged from behind the counter, clearly afraid but ready to defend Aaliyah if needed. Aaliyah stammered, feeling lost and fighting back tears. "I don't have it. I mean it, Marcus." He laughed bitterly. "Then figure it out. Or do you think my problems will solve themselves?" Out of the corner of her eye, Aaliyah noticed Chase standing up from his table with his two friends. His expression was unreadable. For now, he stayed where he was, perhaps waiting for a signal from her, some silent permission. She felt a mix of shame and relief at his presence. "I'm serious, Aaliyah. Don't make me repeat myself," Marcus said, jabbing a finger in her direction. "I'll try to figure something out," she stammered, her voice trembling. "But I don't have anything right now. I need a few days." The diner fell into a suffocating silence. Finally, Marcus seemed to rein in his anger, stepping back with a dramatic throw of his hands as if to say, "I'm done with you." He cast one last hateful glance, first at her, then at everyone watching. "Next time won't be this easy. Remember that." He spun on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The diner remained eerily quiet. Gradually, the customers resumed eating, murmuring to one another in hushed tones, exchanging looks of pity or judgment. Aaliyah felt her heart pounding in her chest, but somehow she managed to hold it together. She was humiliated, terrified, and exhausted. Her legs ached from the tension. When she finally looked up, she saw Chase watching her intently, his eyes filled with quiet concern. He took a cautious step forward as if to check if she was okay. Aaliyah felt tears well up but forced them back. She desperately needed help but wasn't sure if she had the courage to accept it. Aaliyah's heart was still racing as she tried to catch her breath and regain control of her emotions. The people in the diner were slowly returning to their meals, but the atmosphere remained tense. It felt like everyone feared the possible return of Marcus, who had stormed out like a whirlwind. She wiped the counter more out of habit than necessity. When she looked up, she saw Chase approaching with measured steps, his expression filled with genuine concern. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice low enough not to draw the attention of distant customers. Inside, she was still trembling, her stomach knotted from the tension. She struggled to hold herself together, not wanting to break down in front of him. She knew that being too honest might pull him further into her problems, yet she was past the point of pretending everything was fine. "I guess I'm holding up," she whispered, attempting a faint smile. "It's nothing I can't handle." Chase tilted his head, his understanding evident. He didn't seem convinced by her evasive response. Deep down, she sensed that he knew things were much worse than they appeared. But he didn't press her, simply inhaling calmly as though waiting for her to say more. Finally, Aaliyah added in a faint voice, "It's complicated. That guy, he claims I owe him debts I don't even understand. But I'm trying to handle it on my own." "I noticed," Chase replied without a hint of reproach. "But sometimes dealing with everything alone only makes it heavier. If you need help, I'm here." Aaliyah acknowledged his offer with a timid nod. She was afraid his kindness might lead to further trouble, as Marcus never took well to the idea of anyone protecting her. Before she could say anything else, the kitchen door swung open and the cook called out an order. She took the opportunity to step away and breathe deeply. She still had to finish her shift, though her mind was racing, imagining Marcus bursting back in at any moment. Throughout the remainder of her shift, Chase and his biker friends lingered at a table in the back, eating and chatting unhurriedly. Occasionally she caught him glancing her way, but she avoided holding his gaze for too long, embarrassed by the public display of her personal troubles. When it was finally closing time, The customers trickled out one by one until only Aaliyah and her coworker remained, tidying up the tables. Chase got up, adjusted his leather jacket, and slipped his wallet into his. He paid the bill, thanked the cook, and then approached the counter where Aaliyah was wiping down its already clean surface. She looked up as he spoke in a low, direct tone. "Look, I don't want to interfere too much, but I know that guy's dangerous. If you want, I can give you a ride now that you're off work. It's not safe for you to be out alone with him lurking around." The suggestion caught her off guard. Her first instinct was to decline, not wanting to inconvenience him. But she remembered how terrifying it had been the last time she walked home late, feeling like Marcus's car was following her. She had to admit the idea of having someone with her, someone who could handle himself, was reassuring. "No, I don't want to drag you into my mess," she said, her voice trembling slightly, though her eyes betrayed an unspoken plea for help. "I'm just offering you a ride," Chase replied gently. "That's not getting involved. It's just making sure you get home safe. But it's up to you." She weighed her options. On one hand, there was the fear of facing the dark streets and the possibility of Marcus lying in wait. On the other, the apprehension of involving someone she barely knew in her struggles. Still, Chase's sincere concern outweighed her fears. Swallowing her hesitation, she nodded. "Okay. I think I'll take you up on that, but only if it's not too much trouble." Chase gave her a simple smile as if to say everything was under control. For the first time that evening, Aaliyah felt her heart steady just a little. She finished arranging the chairs, grabbed her bag, and said goodbye to her co-worker, who shot her a look that said, "You've got this," as she left with him. Chase led her to a dark, gleaming motorcycle parked by the curb. It looked imposing under the dim streetlights. Aaliyah hesitated before climbing onto the back, unsure of how to position herself or where to hold on. Noticing her uncertainty, Chase gestured calmly, showing her where to place her feet and how to hold onto his waist. "Don't worry," he said reassuringly. "It's easier than it looks." She adjusted her bag over her shoulder, feeling an odd mix of anxiety and anticipation. She had never been into motorcycles, but there was something freeing about the idea of speeding down the road with the wind in her face. Chase turned the key, the engine roared to life, and within seconds, the diner was behind them. The streets were quiet, the faint glow of the streetlights forming pools of yellow along their path. Aaliyah clung tightly to Chase's jacket, unsure of how to balance herself. As they picked up speed, the wind rushed against her face. It was a strange but exhilarating sensation. The helmet's visor slightly blurred her vision, but that didn't dampen the thrill. For the first time in ages, her fear felt different, more like excitement mixed with adrenaline, far removed from the dread Marcus caused. Instead of heading straight to her neighborhood, Chase took a secondary road, almost devoid of traffic. The streetlights grew sparser, and she felt a flicker of confusion. But when she realized he was carefully navigating the quiet path, she didn't protest. Perhaps he was giving her a moment to unwind or simply avoiding areas where Marcus might be waiting. Before long, they arrived at a simple lookout point surrounded by trees and dimly lit by the moon. Chase turned off the engine and glanced back at her to check if she was okay. Aaliyah released her grip on his waist and took a deep breath as she stepped off the bike. "I thought you might need a calmer spot after the day you've had," he explained, standing beside her as the moonlight softly outlined their faces. She looked around, noticing the distant twinkling city lights. If it were earlier, the sunset might have been visible from here. The breeze gently tousled her hair, and for the first time in a long while her thoughts weren't consumed by Marcus or his threats. She was just there, fully present, feeling the cool night air and the quiet comfort of someone who seemed to understand her struggles. "It's beautiful," she admitted, surprised at the calmness in her voice. "I didn't know this place existed." "I come here when I need to clear my head," Chase replied. "I've dealt with some tough stuff too, not long ago. Everyone finds their own way to cope. For me, it's hitting the road and taking in the view." His candid admission caught her attention. It was strange to think that someone as confident and strong as Chase might have faced his own battles. Yet his words were genuine, and for some reason, they made her feel safe. It was as if, for the first time, someone was seeing her without judgment. "I hope it's not too intrusive," Chase began, "but you'll be okay, you know? Sometimes it feels like there's no way out, but there are people who'll reach out to help." She sighed, letting her gaze fall to the city lights. The cicadas sang around them, and the moon completed a scene that felt almost poetic. For a moment, Aaliyah allowed herself to feel something close to peace. It had been so long since she experienced this kind of solace. She had to close her eyes to keep tears from falling, not from fear, but from relief. "Thank you," she said softly, without lifting her head, letting the words flow naturally. For showing up, for helping me, even though you barely know me." Chase shook his head, understanding. "Like I said, you don't have to face everything alone. Meeting you, seeing what you're going through, it reminds me that once someone told me the same thing. Hey, you're not alone." Aaliyah felt a pang of emotion, thanking him again in a voice tinged with vulnerability. She stood there in silence, absorbing the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. Far in the distance, the headlights of a car briefly cut through the darkness before vanishing again, leaving the area peaceful once more. The night breeze carried a faint scent of greenery. Her phone vibrated in her bag, breaking the moment of serenity. On reflex, she pulled it out and saw the battery was almost dead. The screen flickered, about to shut off. Immediately, her mind raced back to Marcus and his incessant calls and messages. A new wave of apprehension crept in. "Damn, it's dead," she murmured as the device powered off. "If Marcus tries to call and can't reach me, he'll lose it." Chase slipped his hand into his pocket but didn't pull out his phone. "If you want, you can use mine later, but maybe it's a good thing to not be so available to him for a while. You don't have to always be at his beck and call." She paused to consider his words. He was right, in a way. Maybe it would be good to disappear for a bit, to breathe without Marcus's shadow over every decision. Perhaps she'd plug her phone in when she got home and deal with the fallout later. She sighed again, allowing herself a few more minutes of calm in this place. "Should we head back?" she finally asked. "Thanks for bringing me here, but I think I've had enough time to clear my head." Chase nodded, stowing the helmets and handing one to her. Aaliyah climbed back onto the bike, this time with less hesitation. As the motorcycle sped toward the city, she held onto his waist with less apprehension, letting the wind touch her face with newfound confidence. It was remarkable how, in just a short time, a sense of connection could form between strangers who carried their own scars but recognized them in each other. When they reached the busier streets, the magic of the lookout and the cicadas faded into the background noise of cars, horns, and traffic lights. Yet Aaliyah didn't feel the same as before. She carried a spark of courage within her. Chase's presence made her believe there might be a way out, that she wasn't as isolated as she'd thought. When they finally arrived at her building, the night had deepened. The iron gate creaked softly as she unlocked it. She dismounted, handed Chase the helmet, and looked at him with slight awkwardness. "Thanks for the ride, and for, everything." "Thank you for trusting me," Chase replied, his tone devoid of overbearing sentimentality. "Really, if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." She nodded, her heart warmed beneath the lingering anxiety. She still had no idea how to solve her problems with Marcus, but at least the crushing loneliness she once felt had lessened. Turning toward the gate, she glanced back to wave, but Chase was already pulling away on his bike. She stood there for a moment, absorbing the moment, before heading up the stairs to her apartment. Aaliyah entered the house with her heart racing, nearly tripping over the rug at the entrance. After closing the door, she noticed the red light blinking on her phone, signaling multiple missed calls. The battery showed only a few remaining bars, as if it might shut off at any moment. She needed to charge it, but she also dreaded discovering how many times Marcus had tried to call or send threatening messages. She leaned her back against the wall, listening to the silence of the apartment. The sense of safety she had felt in Chase's company was quickly replaced by a new wave of anxiety. Was Marcus nearby, lurking, waiting to catch her off guard? Or had he realized that this time he wouldn't get what he wanted? She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She needed to keep her wits about her to face whatever came next. Carefully, she plugged the phone into the charger. The screen lit up, displaying a barrage of alerts. Numerous unheard voice messages. The texts popped up one after another, all from Marcus. "You think you can run from me? Answer now! Don't ignore me, or you'll regret it." Each word seemed to scream off the screen, laden with dark promises. Then came the missed call notifications, one after the other. Aaliyah felt her adrenaline spike with every alert. She sat on the edge of the couch, running her hands over her face. She didn't want to listen to the voice messages, but something compelled her to tap the icon, as if she needed to gauge the extent of the problem Marcus was planning for her this time. His voice came through muffled but still filled with rage. "Aaliyah, answer me, or I swear I'll find you wherever you are. You can't just disappear. There are debts to pay, and they're not small." She swallowed hard and stopped the recording. She couldn't bear to listen to more. The silence, oddly enough, now seemed preferable to his aggressive voice. Still, she considered sending him a short message in hopes of calming him down. "I wasn't online. We'll talk tomorrow." But she deleted the draft before sending it. She feared sounding too desperate, which might only encourage Marcus to exploit her vulnerability. Instead, she left the phone aside, unanswered, and went to bed with her breathing uneven. The next morning, a ray of sunlight pierced through the apartment, but Aaliyah woke to her alarm feeling drained. She took a quick shower, and as she dressed, she noticed the purple mark on her arm, a result of Marcus shoving her days earlier. The sight made her shudder, a stark reminder of how out of control things had become. She grabbed her bag and left for work, unsure how she would face the day after so many threats. The day began relatively quietly at the diner. The morning rush was made up of people looking for coffee to shake off their sleepiness or students preparing for their classes. Aaliyah busied herself with taking orders and tried to keep a cheerful demeanor. However, each time the door opened, her heart leaped, fearing Marcus would storm in again, furious. Still, life didn't stop. She served customers, cleaned tables, and tried to focus on the moment. A coworker noticed her worried expression, but chose not to pry too much, instead offering silent support by helping her tackle a mountain of dirty dishes she nearly dropped. Near lunchtime, an unusual commotion caught everyone's attention. A young man ran down the sidewalk shouting about a car that had abruptly parked. The diner's door swung open, and to Aaliyah's shock, Marcus was there again. He barged in, eyes brimming with tension and voice louder than ever. He wore the dark jacket Aaliyah recognized as his intimidation uniform. Before she could say anything, he slammed his arm on the counter, leaning aggressively toward her. "I'm not playing games. Where's the money you promised? I'm done giving you chances." Aaliyah instinctively stepped back, her stomach churning. Several people in the diner stopped mid-meal to watch the scene. She took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. "Marcus, you know I don't have that much money right now. I need more time." He let out a harsh laugh, as if mocking her response. "Time? You think my creditors will wait? They're coming for me, and I'll take everyone down with me if I have to." His glare burned with fury. "Including you." She swallowed hard. This was worse than usual. The way he spoke made it clear he was in much deeper trouble than just debt. His tone carried the bitterness of someone losing control, and that terrified her. Some customers began to leave, alarmed. The manager, who had been in the back, came to the counter to see what was happening. Recognizing Marcus as the man who had caused trouble before, he tried to intervene. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to calm down. This is a peaceful establishment, not the place for this kind of argument." Marcus shot the manager a threatening look, making him retreat. "I'm not leaving until she fixes my problem." Aaliyah's heart pounded erratically. She felt cornered. She needed to do something to get him to leave, or he would destroy the fragile sense of security she still had at her job. "I'll try," she murmured, avoiding his gaze. "I'll try to find some money, but I can't do it right now, with everyone watching." Marcus slammed his hand on the counter, causing everything around to shake. "Fine. Then we'll settle this outside. Now move." He grabbed her arm forcefully, and she instinctively tried to pull away, but the difference in strength was evident. Even so, her eyes welled with tears of humiliation as he dragged her in front of everyone. A coworker opened her mouth, outraged, but hesitated to intervene, remembering how dangerous Marcus was. Two braver customers tried to say something, but Marcus's menacing glare made them shrink back. Aaliyah didn't scream, but the fear choked her. The pressure of his grip nearly made her lose her balance. Once outside, she finally managed to speak, her words trembling and barely audible. "Let me go. You're hurting me." He loosened his grip slightly but didn't let her go. "Stop the drama. Crying won't solve anything." He glanced around and lowered his voice, probably to avoid drawing more attention. "I need an advance, any amount you can get. And I mean it, Aaliyah. If I go down, you're going down with me." She gasped, assessing the situation. The little money she had in the bank was just enough to cover rent and basic bills. It wouldn't even come close to the amount Marcus claimed to need. But the way he spoke, "You're going down with me," was chilling. It meant the people he owed might come after her too. Before she could respond, the loud rumble of motorcycles interrupted them. Across the street, Chase and two friends from his motorcycle club were approaching the diner. As they parked in front of the establishment, the scene became clear. Marcus gripping Aaliyah tightly as she struggled to break free. Chase was the first to step off his bike, standing tall beside them. His expression shifted from calm to something much more intense in seconds. "Let her go," he said, his tone firm but not shouted. Marcus turned, frowning. He recognized Chase as the same guy he had seen at the diner days earlier, full of swagger. He released Aaliyah's arm with a rough shove and stepped forward, facing this new challenger. "Who the hell are you to interfere? This is none of your business." Chase didn't back down. His friends dismounted their bikes and stepped closer, silent but with expressions that made it clear they were ready to protect Aaliyah if necessary. "It's my business when you're hurting her," Chase insisted, his voice steady. "And I'm not standing by to watch this." Marcus, in a burst of rage, moved as if to charge at Chase, but one of the bikers, an older man with a graying beard, stepped forward, blocking his path. It was clear Marcus was outnumbered, but he didn't seem to care. His expression was that of a man cornered, ready to lash out. "If I were you, I'd back off," Marcus growled, trying to maintain an air of superiority. "You don't know what I'm involved in. You don't want to become a target." Chase raised an eyebrow. "We understand enough, but this woman isn't alone, and you're not laying a finger on her again. Got it?" The diner's patrons, now watching from the windows, held their breath. Aaliyah, still nursing her sore arm, took a few steps back, almost hiding behind Chase and the bikers. Marcus glared at her, exhaled sharply as if he wanted to say something, but simply turned away. Before getting into his car, he shouted, his voice echoing down the street, "This isn't over. I'll get every cent. And if I have to go through you, so be it." The car sped off with screeching tires, leaving the acrid smell of burnt rubber behind. Aaliyah collapsed into silent tears, letting them fall as she struggled to catch her breath. The onlookers began to disperse, and the diner's manager stared at the scene, unsure how to react. Chase approached her cautiously, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" She shook her head, barely managing to speak. "No, I'm just scared." One of the bikers, the older man, scanned the street with a concerned look. "That guy's in deep trouble. Don't underestimate what he might do, Aaliyah." "I know," she said, wiping her tears and trying to compose herself. "But I don't know what to do. I feel like he'll come back, even angrier." Chase exchanged a glance with the older man before looking back at her. "You need help, whether it's protection or something else. Seriously, you can't keep waiting for the worst to happen." Aaliyah felt a mix of gratitude and apprehension. She looked at the motorcycle club, remembering that despite their tough reputation, these men had just defended her. Maybe I'll accept. I just don't want to drag you all into this. We can handle more than you think." Chase's voice held no arrogance, just conviction. "And we're not letting you face this alone." The diner's manager, still in shock, approached hesitantly, murmuring something about how the incident was bad for business and asking if the situation could be resolved discreetly, away from the establishment. Aaliyah apologized, feeling guilty for causing trouble at work. Chase made a calming gesture toward her. "Want me to take you somewhere? We can talk and figure out how to deal with this." She glanced inside the diner, where a few curious patrons still lingered. Then she looked at the manager, who confirmed she could leave early. It was better for everyone. Aaliyah nodded, gathered her belongings from the back room, and left, her ears pounding. She felt a mix of fear and relief, grateful not to be entirely abandoned. Chase and the motorcycle club escorted her to the parking lot where their bikes were lined up. The older biker suggested she take a different route home in case Marcus was following her. They seemed accustomed to dealing with risky situations, or at least knew how to act preventively. Aaliyah thought about all the times Marcus had humiliated her and how today she had finally been defended in public. It gave her a glimmer of hope, even though it didn't lessen the real danger hanging over her. In the end, she decided to ride on the back of Chase's motorcycle again. She felt she couldn't handle things on her own, and his presence alone brought some comfort. She climbed on, gripping his jacket tightly, and they left behind the sight of the diner, a place that now felt more like the setting of a nightmare than a workplace. Aaliyah placed her belongings in the corner of the small room, her hands still trembling. It hadn't been long since she returned home, but her mind was spinning with a whirlwind of worries. During the chaos of the recent confrontations, she'd picked up a phone Marcus had dropped, but she hadn't found the courage to go through it until now. She stared at the device on the table as if it were a heavy stone, unsure whether she should snoop through something that wasn't hers. Yet deep down, she knew that if she wanted to understand the extent of Marcus's debts, the phone might hold the answers she needed. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she took a deep breath and grabbed the phone. Its screen was cracked, but pressing the side button revealed a faint light, indicating the battery still had some charge. The screen flickered intermittently, showing signs of a badly damaged system. Still, Aaliyah managed to catch a glimpse of a fragment of a conversation on a messaging app. She squinted, trying to read the words before the screen went dark. There were mentions of deadlines, interest rates, and reinforced collection. "Oh my God," she murmured, her stomach twisting in knots. She managed to get the screen to light up again for a moment, but it flickered and glitched, making the text hard to decipher. Most of the messages came from unknown contacts. Each line contained threats, exorbitant amounts, and strict payment deadlines. One name appeared repeatedly, something like Cobra or the Cobra, always in the context of loan sharks who didn't tolerate defaults. Aaliyah pursed her lips, piecing together what she had suspected all along. Marcus's debts were no joke. A chill ran down her spine as she recalled the first time Marcus had mentioned investing in her name. It had been months ago when he promised it would only involve small installments, nothing unmanageable. But as time went on, his assurances of quick payments faded, and the relentless debts began piling up in her name. She closed her eyes, remembering Marcus's charming demeanor early in their relationship, how he'd called her a true partner. She had been so naive, never imagining that she would find herself entangled in a web of fake debts and very real threats. She stopped fiddling with the phone when the screen finally went black. the battery dead. Grabbing the charger that had come with it, she plugged it into an outlet by the bed. Exhausted but with work looming, she got up to take a quick shower, hoping to clear her mind. Warm water cascaded over her shoulders as memories of the recent horrors at the diner replayed in her mind. Everything felt too heavy. The shame, the fear, the anger at herself for letting things spiral this far. Later, at work, her tired expression was hard to hide. Behind the counter, arranging cups, she felt the tension inside her growing. At one point, Chase showed up. He was accompanied by a friend from his motorcycle club but didn't linger long with him before approaching her. Waiting for a moment when few customers were around, he called Aaliyah aside. "Are you managing all this?" he asked softly. "You know you can talk to me, right?" She hesitated. Her initial impulse was to say everything was fine, but that felt more false with each passing day. Finally, she sighed and said, "I found out some things. Marcus, he's involved with dangerous loan sharks. I'm scared, Chase. Scared this will blow back on me, too." He frowned, clearly worried. "Do you have any kind of evidence or anything like that?" "I don't know if it counts as evidence, but I have his phone. It fell when he showed up. And from what I've seen, it's not good. Just remembering it gives me chills." Chase scratched his beard, thoughtful. "Maybe we could take this to the police. Those loan sharks don't mess around, and Marcus has been threatening you for a while." Aaliyah looked down, uneasy. "I'm scared that if I do something like that, it'll only make things worse. What if they come after me? Or after you?" He gently touched her arm. "Sometimes you've got to take the right step, even if it feels dangerous. But if you want to explore other options, maybe talk to a lawyer, someone who can guide you on how to deal with these debts." She nodded but didn't answer right away. The idea of lawyers and legal processes felt so far removed from her reality. She lived paycheck to paycheck, barely managing to cover rent. Hiring a professional seemed impossible. Still, she had to admit that ignoring the problem wouldn't make it go away. Later, when the diner quieted down, Chase called her out to the parking lot, where his friend was waiting. The man had a calm expression, with streaks of gray in his beard, and introduced himself as Roy. He explained that years ago he had helped a young woman in a similar situation, dealing with illegal debts. "I'm not a lawyer or anything," Roy said in a deep but friendly voice, "but I've helped people find the right contacts. There are organizations that support victims of scams and threats, and if you need physical protection, we have people who can watch your back, you know?" Aaliyah looked at them both, feeling equal parts grateful and apprehensive. The leather jackets, tattoos, and firm demeanors made Roy and Chase seem like men from a different world, one she didn't know well. Noticing her gaze, Roy gave a faint smile. "I know we might seem intimidating, but I promise, most of the guys in the club just want to see justice served. We don't go around picking fights." She blushed, realizing how obvious her scrutiny had been. But deep down, she felt more relieved to have their support than she was willing to admit. "Sorry, I didn't mean to judge. It's just—" She bit her lower lip. "Strange to trust people I barely know. But at the same time, I'm terrified of being alone in this." "That makes sense," Chase acknowledged. "We're not forcing you into anything. Just know we're here if you need us." At that moment, Aaliyah's phone vibrated in her apron pocket, cutting the conversation short. She pulled it out, already dreading seeing Marcus's name on the screen. And there it was. "Don't try to hide. If anyone helps you, they'll pay for it too." The threat was clear and stung her eyes. Her stomach sank like she'd been thrown into a bottomless pit. "He's still harassing me," she murmured, showing the screen to Chase and Roy. "He's warning that anyone who helps me will suffer too." Roy shook his head, clearly upset. "This is more serious than it seems. Those guys chasing Marcus might use you as leverage, and he knows it. That's why he's so desperate." Aaliyah's legs nearly gave out. She had to lean against the wall to steady herself. It felt like a massive weight was pressing down on her chest, making it hard. Chase noticed her state and helped her sit on a nearby ledge while Roy handed her a glass of water he'd fetched from inside the diner. "Take it easy. Breathe," Chase said softly. "We're here for you." She closed her eyes, trying to hold back the tears that were welling up. In that moment, everything inside her seemed to collapse. She began crying quietly, each sob slicing through her throat. Images of the loan sharks, Marcus's relentless threats, and the danger of involving those helping her all blended into a suffocating pain. "I can't take this anymore," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I wish I could just disappear." Chase and Roy exchanged worried glances. Then Chase leaned closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Believe me, you don't have to disappear. We'll figure this out. You have us, and there are people who can guide you." Just then, Aaliyah's co-worker stepped out of the side door of the diner, calling her back to the shift. Aaliyah wiped her face and signaled that she'd be there in a moment. She thanked Chase and Roy for being there, albeit shyly. As she returned to the diner, her heart was in pieces, but she felt a glimmer of hope. Aaliyah looked at her phone screen with trembling hands, rereading the message she had just discovered. Her name was mentioned amidst veiled threats, making her feel more vulnerable than ever. She knew that attending the motorcycle club's meeting could open new doors, but it also risked provoking Marcus's fury further. Still, the thought of remaining isolated without support was unbearable. She had to try. Later that afternoon, the sound of a motorcycle parking in front of the building echoed through her window. Aaliyah sat on the small couch, her heart racing as she saw Chase arrive. He had texted her earlier, saying he would pick her up, and there he was, Chase asked as she descended the steps. She adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder, unsure how to answer. "As much as it can be," she replied in a faint voice, managing a shy smile. "I'm nervous." He nodded, handing her the helmet. "I promise, it's nothing to be afraid of. The club asked me to bring you along. They get excited when someone new shows up, especially someone we want to help." Aaliyah swallowed hard. She wasn't sure what to expect. In her mind, a group of bikers meant tough, stern, and unpredictable people. But part of her wanted to believe that assumption was premature. After all, Chase and Roy had shown her genuine empathy. She climbed onto the back of the motorcycle, settling in carefully. Her bag rested snugly between her torso and Chase's broad back. As he accelerated, the wind hit her face, bringing a fleeting sense of freedom. Despite her apprehension, she couldn't help but feel a thrill, a mix of adrenaline and curiosity. Perhaps it was a sign that for the first time in a while she was attempting to change the course of her story. The road they took was relatively quiet at that hour. They passed a few traffic lights, turned down sparsely populated streets, and gradually left the city center behind. Aaliyah watched as the scenery changed, with buildings becoming more spaced out. The wind brushed her arms, and a glimmer of hope began to sprout, though surrounded by clouds of doubt. "Not much farther," Chase said, glancing in the rearview mirror. "The clubhouse is in a quieter area. We've got space for the bikes and family gatherings without bothering the neighbors." She nodded. She had imagined a dark, foreboding place but was willing to see it for herself. A few minutes later they arrived at a wide, black iron gate. Several motorcycles were lined up inside, gleaming under yellow lights hanging from makeshift posts. The sound of music echoed, hinting at a festive atmosphere inside. "Ready?" Chase asked after parking. She dismounted, removing the helmet with slightly shaky hands. Taking in the scene, she saw a large, open warehouse with a side door where the aroma of barbecue and laughter wafted out. The thought of Marcus discovering her whereabouts sent a shiver down her spine, but she tried to maintain composure. "I'm ready," she replied, not entirely steady but determined to move forward. As she walked through the gate, she was met with an unexpected sight. Couples laughing, children running between tables, people serving drinks and food at a long outdoor counter. Despite the leather jackets and emblems that signified the bikers' brotherhood, The atmosphere was far more welcoming than she had imagined. "Hey, Chase," someone called from a table, waving. "Is that the special guest?" She blushed, realizing she was the center of attention. Chase lightly rested a hand on her shoulder, signaling that everything was okay. As they approached, he introduced her to a few friends, who greeted her with handshakes, smiles, and light-hearted comments about her needing to try the club's famous barbecue. Initially, she was shy, but she soon noticed that most people treated her with warmth. A woman with short hair, wearing a jacket with the same emblem, approached carrying a cup of juice. "Hi, I'm Mandy," she said, handing the cup to Aaliyah. "You must be the one Chase mentioned. Welcome." Aaliyah muttered a thank you and took a sip of the juice, feeling less out of place with each passing moment. Mandy explained that she had been part of the club for years and had seen many stories like Aaliyah's, people escaping problems, debts, or abusive relationships. Despite their tough exterior, most of them understood the value of protecting those in need. "Don't let some of their serious looks fool you," Mandy joked, pointing to a tall, mustachioed man tending the barbecue flames. "Jack over there might look like a grumpy bear, but he's the first to lend a hand when someone needs shelter." At that moment, a child ran by, laughing, chased by another wielding a toy sword. Aaliyah watched, surprised by the presence of so many families. She had imagined something entirely different. Mandy noticed her reaction and gave her a knowing wink. "We build bonds here. It's a brotherhood, but it's also a kind of adoptive family." Across the warehouse, Roy appeared, nodding approvingly as he greeted her. He seemed pleased she had accepted the invitation. He began explaining that if she ever needed help, they had contacts who could connect her with lawyers or even a protection group for victims of threats. With each word, Aaliyah felt the tension in her chest ease slightly. "You don't have to declare war on anyone, but if you decide to take legal action, we'll make sure you're not alone," Roy explained. She nodded, still unsure if she had the courage to go to the police. The simple fact that there were people willing to support her brought some relief. Looking around, she saw members sharing jokes while others worked on parked bikes. It felt like a large, laid-back gathering, though she couldn't ignore the reason for her presence. Chase returned with 2 plates of barbecue and sides. He handed one to Aaliyah with a friendly smile. "We usually gather like this once a month. You came on a celebration day, but don't be fooled. They'll take any issue seriously." Aaliyah took the plate, her appetite lacking but willing to try. "Thanks, it's comforting to see how close you all are." He just shrugged, smiling. "We just do what's right." As they ate, Aaliyah's phone buzzed. A series of texts from Marcus flooded the screen, ranging from furious insults to a chilling message. "I know where you are." Her heart raced. "He knows," she whispered to Chase, showing him the screen. His expression hardened. "Don't worry." Though the gathering continued, Aaliyah became distracted, frequently glancing toward the warehouse entrance, fearing Marcus might show up unexpectedly. Several people noticed her unease and tried to reassure her. Mandy returned and gently pulled Aaliyah aside. She shared her own story of surviving an abusive relationship, recounting how the club had helped her rebuild her life. "When I came here, I only knew Jack. I was terrified, thinking the world was going to swallow me whole. But they helped me. They showed me there's another way to live, away from the terror I was enduring." Aaliyah listened intently, recognizing a familiar pain in Mandy's voice. Tears welled up as she thought about how isolated she had felt, now surrounded by potential allies. "Sorry," she muttered, wiping her face. "I just thought there was no way out." "If you decide to stay, they won't let you down," Mandy said with a chuckle, though her tone carried a serious undertone. "And if you choose to move forward, they'll be the best shield against what's coming." That thought lingered in Aaliyah's mind, courage slowly blooming. She still trembled at the thought of Marcus, but each smile and word of encouragement she received made her believe she could take a hesitant step toward her freedom. However, the evening's tranquility didn't last. A curly-haired woman appeared at the warehouse door, calling Chase urgently. "I just saw someone hanging around the front gate. Didn't look like one of ours. They were in a suspicious car and sped off." Chase's expression darkened, and Roy, nearby, set his drink down, alert. Aaliyah felt her breath quicken. It was almost certain that Marcus or his associates were involved. "Stay calm," Mandy whispered, placing a reassuring hand on Aaliyah's arm. "No one here will let anything happen to you." Chase returned to Aaliyah's side, his gaze serious. "If it's Marcus, he's playing with fire. We won't let him near you, but you should be prepared." She nodded, unsure how to handle the situation. The following minutes were marked by an uneasy silence as everyone awaited updates. Then Aaliyah's phone rang, the screen displaying Marcus's name. Reluctantly, she answered, his venomous voice spilling out, "I know where you are. If you think those bikers can protect you, you're dead wrong. This isn't over." A wave of fear coursed through her. Before she could respond, the line went dead, leaving her heart pounding in her chest. Swallowing hard, she told Chase what Marcus had said. His jaw tightened, concern evident. "He's close," Chase concluded grimly. "We need to check the whole neighborhood." Roy, Mandy, and other bikers immediately geared up, donning helmets and jackets. The party had turned into a state of heightened alert. Aaliyah felt dizzy, wondering if this would spiral into chaos. She didn't want to drag others into her problems, but it was clear they were determined to protect her. Aaliyah tried to distract herself inside the warehouse, but the sound of motorcycles leaving and returning periodically made her feel more tense than safe. Chase and a few friends had left earlier to scout the neighborhood, but returned saying they hadn't found anyone lurking around. Even so, the sensation of being watched wouldn't leave her. Several questions kept repeating in her head. Could Marcus be hiding nearby? Was one of his creditors parked in a car, just waiting to act? Some members of the motorcycle club tried to maintain a light atmosphere, handing out drinks and playing music again. The children kept running around, though they noticed the serious discussions among the adults and sensed something was different. Aaliyah sat curled up on an improvised bench beside a motorcycle, hugging her knees in an attempt to control her anxiety. She wasn't used to having so many people concerned about her well-being, but she also didn't want to put them at risk. Mandy approached, bringing her a glass of juice, and sat down beside her without saying anything. The simple act of sharing the silence was comforting. After a moment, Mandy broke it. "Everyone here prefers to avoid trouble, but if it comes down to it, they'll protect you." Aaliyah lowered her eyes, recalling all the times she had felt alone and powerless. "It's strange to accept help. I've never really had anyone to count on." "Well, now it's different," Mandy said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Don't let fear paralyze you." As they talked, Roy returned from a quick patrol outside and called Aaliyah over with a concerned expression. "We need to talk. Come with me." She got up slowly, her stomach in knots, and followed him to a makeshift room in the back of the warehouse where they kept tools and motorcycle parts. Chase was there too, his face showing uncertainty. In the dimly lit space, illuminated only by a hanging bulb, Aaliyah felt a pang of anxiety. "We got some strange intel," Roy said, arms crossed. "An acquaintance spotted an old car circling the area. The driver was asking if you were here." Aaliyah's mind raced. It must be Marcus's car, or someone sent by him. "He might just be trying to scare you," Roy continued. "But when people like him get desperate, they can escalate to something worse." Chase nodded, looking at Aaliyah. "Do you have any idea how he might have found out about this place?" She thought for a moment, remembering strange messages she'd received on her phone. "I have no idea. Maybe he followed me again, or someone tipped him off. He often stakes out my work or my home. It wouldn't be impossible for him to track me here." Roy sighed. "Then we need to prepare for the possibility that he'll show up for real, not just skulk around." A heavy silence fell. Aaliyah's chest tightened as she thought about the danger Marcus posed, not just to her, but to everyone there. Her greatest fear was that he might resort to violence, putting others at risk. At the same time, she remembered that Marcus was just a man overwhelmed by debt, but desperation, as she well knew, could make him dangerous. "We could take you to a friend's house in another neighborhood for a few days," Roy suggested. "It'd be safer than going back to your apartment alone." She hesitated, her voice almost failing. "I don't want to be a burden, but I can't go back to my place feeling safe either." Chase made a gesture of understanding. "You're not a burden. If it means keeping you safer, we can handle this right now." "Okay," Aaliyah said, her heart racing. "I'll go." Roy left to arrange the logistics while Chase and Aaliyah returned to the main area of the warehouse. Many people had resumed their conversations and the music, trying to restore a cheerful atmosphere despite the circumstances. It was as if the group collectively decided not to let the shadow of a problem overshadow their gathering. Still, Aaliyah noticed that some members remained vigilant, lingering near the entrance gate and speaking in hushed tones, ready to react if anyone caused trouble. Despite everything, she felt strangely protected. "Come, I'll show you the other side of the warehouse," Chase said, trying to distract her. "That's where they keep some custom bikes." They walked through a side door into a spacious area lit by fluorescent lights. Motorcycles of various models stood on stands, some with detailed paint jobs, others still undergoing restoration. Chase commented on each one, avoiding too much technical jargon, instead sharing stories of the group's past road trips. "Once we crossed half the country to visit a friend who'd moved away," he began, pointing to a custom bike with a large symbol on its side. "It was quite a journey, but worth every mile." Aaliyah smiled, fascinated by the affection he had for what he considered his family on two wheels. In another context, she might have been more captivated by those tales of freedom and adventure. But here, her mind kept reminding her that she wasn't there for fun. She was there because of the looming threat of Marcus. "Maybe one day I'll get out of all this and finally have a moment of freedom like that," she murmured, almost unaware she was speaking aloud. "You will," Chase said, stopping and turning to face her. "It may not seem like it now, but there's a way out." She bit her lip. "I hope so." When they returned to the main yard, Roy was waiting, speaking with two motorcyclists Aaliyah didn't recognize. As the couple approached, Roy gestured, and the other men went to grab their helmets. "It's all set," Roy told Aaliyah. "They'll take you to a safe place. Tomorrow, we'll figure out how you can grab your belongings or go to work without risk." The thought of leaving her apartment, even temporarily, made her uneasy. But the memory of Marcus's relentless threats tipped the scales in favor of leaving. It wasn't worth risking her life just to avoid troubling others. "And you?" she asked Chase. "Are you coming with me?" "I'll follow to make sure you get there safely," he replied. "Then I'll come back to handle some things with the group." Aaliyah nodded, clutching her bag tightly to her chest. The previously lively music now seemed muffled, as if everyone were bracing for something to happen at any moment. Even the children had slowed their play, sensing the tension in the air. "Thank you, everyone," she whispered, glancing around. You don't even know me, but you're helping me." Mandy appeared with a jacket. "Here, it might get cold out there. And don't worry, if anyone tries to chase you, they'll find it's not so easy." Aaliyah smiled faintly as she took the jacket. She knew Marcus and his problems wouldn't vanish because of this, but for the first time she believed she didn't have to face it all alone. Aaliyah stared at her phone screen where a new anonymous threat loomed, warning her that she would pay dearly if she dared to take sides against Marcus. Her knees weakened for a moment as though her strength was abandoning her. Chase, standing by her side, noticed her pale face and gently steadied her elbow. "What happened?" he asked, his tone laced with concern. She showed him the message, unable to speak immediately. They were standing at the entrance of the building, on their way back to a safe location. but the warning reignited the fear she had been trying to suppress. Chase read the text, his mouth tightening as he glanced around, as if expecting to spot someone watching them. There was no one in sight except Roy, who was scanning the street ahead. "We need to move now," Roy said, stepping closer. "Someone might be watching." Aaliyah slipped her phone into her pocket. Despite her trembling legs, she followed the two down the sidewalk to where Chase's motorcycle was parked. Roy mounted his own bike, started the engine, and kept looking over his shoulder. The tension in the air was palpable. The message made it clear that this was no longer just about Marcus. Other dangerous individuals, likely the loan sharks Aaliyah had uncovered hints about on Marcus's broken phone, were now involved. When they arrived at the safe house, a modest home where Aaliyah had spent the previous night, her heart began to settle. The homeowner greeted them, assuring them that everything was calm. Once inside, Aaliyah dropped her bag on the table and let out an exhausted sigh, as though she needed to gather her strength for the next step. "This can't keep going," she muttered, not addressing anyone in particular. "I can't keep jumping from place to place, scared of being attacked. I need to do something." For days, it had become increasingly clear that Aaliyah wouldn't escape this vicious cycle unless she formally filed a complaint and sought proper legal support. Roy, who had experience helping people in trouble, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know a lawyer who works with victims of fraud and coercion. He's dealt with cases like this before, with threats and everything. If you want, I can call him now." "Yes," she replied, her voice firm despite its faintness. "Please do that." As Roy stepped away to make the call, Aaliyah felt her legs give out again and leaned on the sofa for support. Chase moved closer, offering silent encouragement. After so much tension, she realized it was time to act. She needed official help, something more substantial than promises of protection. Each new threat from Marcus underscored his ruthlessness, and if he truly owed debts to loan sharks, things could spiral out of control even faster. A few minutes later, Roy returned, looking more confident. "I talked to Mauricio. He can see us in half an hour. It's about 15 minutes away by bike." "Let's go now," Aaliyah decided without hesitation. "I need to deal with this." Chase and Roy agreed, knowing they would need to proceed cautiously. They rode in a formation. Roy led the way with Aaliyah on his bike, and Chase followed behind to watch their rear. The cold wind brushed against Aaliyah's face as they navigated streets and avenues, but her focus was elsewhere, on how to explain her story to the lawyer and whether her testimony would be enough for the authorities to act. At the address Roy provided, they found a small commercial building with a glass facade and a discreet sign for the law office. They were ushered to a second-floor office by a receptionist. The lawyer, Mauricio, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor and a steady voice, greeted them with a polite handshake. They sat at a dark wooden desk neatly organized with colorful folders. Mauricio asked her to recount everything from the beginning, with as much detail as possible. As she spoke, painful memories resurfaced. The start of her relationship with Marcus, the first debts taken in her name, the constant threats, and her gradual realization that she was entangled in something far more dangerous than she had imagined. She also described recent incidents, including the attack at the diner and the increasingly terrifying messages. "He makes me feel guilty and responsible for something that isn't mine, but it's in my name," she said, her voice quivering. "And now, with these loan sharks, I'm afraid for my life, and for the lives of those helping me." Mauricio took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions about dates and names. His calm, methodical approach gave Aaliyah some reassurance. Finally, he adjusted his glasses and sighed slightly. "Here's what we can do. First, we'll file a formal complaint with the police, reporting the threats, coercion, and fraudulent use of your name for debts. Additionally, if we can prove Marcus signed documents illegally under your name, we can file a lawsuit to void those debts and hold him accountable, but this will require evidence." Aaliyah immediately thought of Marcus's broken phone. "I have part of a conversation saved," The phone is damaged, but I can still read some messages. There are people demanding large sums and mentioning my name as if I were his collateral. That could be critical, Mauricio agreed. We'll need to back up those messages, screenshots, and anything else that could serve as evidence. She nodded, feeling a spark of hope for the first time. That broken phone might actually prove useful. Chase and Roy added their own observations about Marcus's behavior, filling in more details. When Mauricio outlined the initial plan, filing a police report, seeking protective measures, and gathering documentation to dispute the debts, Aaliyah felt a wave of relief so intense that she nearly cried. "I'll go with you to the police station if you want," Chase offered, breaking the tension. "And I'm sure someone from the club will come along too, so you're not alone." The idea of having one or two motorcyclists accompany her was unexpectedly comforting. Despite her lingering fear, she knew she had to take this step. They left Mauricio's office with his contact details and clear instructions. Roy carried the initial documents Mauricio had printed, ensuring nothing would be lost. As they exited the building, the setting sun cast an orange hue across the sky. The cooler evening air carried a sense of possibility, as if things were finally shifting in her favor. "We can go to the station now if you feel ready," Roy suggested. "The sooner we formalize this, the better." Aaliyah agreed, even as her stomach churned with anxiety. Back on Roy's bike, with Chase following close behind, the slow-moving traffic felt interminable. Images of Marcus's enraged face flashed through her mind, his bulging veins, his unrelenting threats. She knew retaliation was likely. The police station was situated along a bustling road, surrounded by shops closing for the day and vendors packing up their goods. As they dismounted, Aaliyah felt a wave of dizziness. She stared at the gray building with its official crest and a side gate for police cars and officers. Chase noticed her unease and briefly held her hand, a silent gesture of strength. She squeezed back. Inside, a security guard directed them to the reception desk, where Aaliyah explained her intent to file a report for threats and coercion. They waited for a short time before being called into a smaller office. There, an officer took her statement. Aaliyah recounted much of what she had told Mauricio, handing over her ID and answering additional questions while Roy and Chase waited outside. After nearly an hour, the report was complete. The officer explained that depending on the evidence, Marcus could be summoned for questioning and protective measures could be issued for Aaliyah. It wouldn't be immediate, but it was a start. Signing the report gave her a strange chill, a mix of fear and relief. There was no turning back now. As they left the station under the glow of streetlights, Aaliyah leaned against one of the motorcycles, her hand brushing her face as she tried to hold back tears. "You were brave today," Roy said, his voice steady and reassuring. "I don't feel brave. I just feel exhausted." She managed a faint smile. "But I had to do this." Chase adjusted his helmet, glancing at her and then at Roy. "We should take her back to our friend's house. It's not safe for her to be alone, especially now that this is official." Aaliyah nodded, realizing she wouldn't find peace in her own apartment. Marcus's reaction would undoubtedly be violent once he discovered her actions. She climbed onto Roy's bike again, with Chase trailing close behind. The short ride back felt interminable. Every red light made her wonder, is Marcus following us? Is that car tailing us? Thankfully, they arrived without incident. The homeowner sat on the porch, sipping coffee, and was relieved to hear about Aaliyah's bold move. Over a simple dinner, they discussed next steps, gathering more evidence, reaching out to specialized lawyers to void the fraudulent debts, and staying in touch with the police. Roy frequently checked his phone, awaiting further instructions from Mauricio. Meanwhile, Chase kept a vigilant eye on the street from the window. For Aaliyah, after dinner, Roy excused himself to update the motorcycle club on the day's events, while Chase stayed behind, determined not to leave her unprotected. As night fell, Aaliyah felt the weight of the day catching up with her. She needed rest, but the thought of Marcus's next move, be it more threats or a direct confrontation, kept her on edge, Before retreating to bed, Aaliyah leaned against the living room wall, watching Chase as he ended a phone call with someone from the club. He pocketed his phone and met her gaze. "All set. Everyone knows about the report and they're ready for anything," he said. She exhaled deeply, unsure whether to feel more secure or more anxious. Then, in a voice filled with quiet resolve, Chase added, "We need to end this once and for all before he hurts you. Or worse." Aaliyah barely closed her eyes that night. The modest shelter where she had temporarily found refuge offered some comfort, but the weight of recent events wouldn't let her relax. On the other side of the wall, Chase remained alert, as if waiting for a call or some sign that Marcus might attempt a surprise attack. The night passed with an unsettling silence, and when the first rays of sunlight pierced through the curtain's cracks, she knew the decisive day had arrived. It was just past 7 in the morning when Aaliyah's phone rang, breaking the quiet. She answered immediately, her voice slightly trembling. "Hello?" She recognized Marcus's voice at once. It was harsh, brimming with resentment. He accused her of going to the police, claiming there were now false charges against him, but warned that if she didn't meet him, alone, at a specific location, he would make her life unbearable. Before she could respond, Marcus hung up, leaving an oppressive void on the line. Chase entered the room moments later, reading the fear in her expression. She recounted what she had heard, still trembling. Minutes later, Roy and other members of the motorcycle club arrived to assess the situation. Aaliyah found herself surrounded by firm gazes, each one determined to help. "He wants you to go alone, but it's obviously a trap," Roy noted, arms crossed. "We're not letting you do this without backup." The tension in the room was palpable. They all knew Marcus was cornered, with the police closing in and creditors growing impatient, and when someone feels trapped, they might act recklessly. Aaliyah nodded but spoke in a faint voice. "I can't keep living like this. If it's going to end, let's end it now. But I don't want anyone getting hurt because of me." Chase sighed, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "No one's getting hurt because of you. We'll plan this smartly, and everyone will come out safe." The homeowner brought coffee for the group, and as they discussed the plan, Aaliyah realized how invested these people were in helping her. It felt surreal to think that these bikers, once just occasional diners at the cafe where she worked, had become her safety net. A short while later, a call came in from the police station. Lawyer Mauricio had secured a warrant against Marcus, as evidence had surfaced of a more violent plan in the making. The police were prepared to intervene during the final confrontation, provided Aaliyah confirmed the meeting location. They gathered to iron out every detail. The idea was for Aaliyah to meet Marcus as planned, but under constant monitoring from the motorcycle club. The police would arrive discreetly, ready to act at the right moment. Even so, Aaliyah felt her chest tighten, haunted by memories of being cornered by Marcus's threats. This time, however, she wouldn't be alone, and that brought a quiet sense of relief. "Let's do this," she said, mustering her courage. "The sooner I face him, the better." A few plainclothes officers met the group near the edge. They introduced themselves, confirmed the plan, and coordinated radio signals for the moment of the ambush. Aaliyah's palms were clammy, but she kept a determined expression. There was no turning back. When they arrived at the designated spot, a nearly deserted area with an empty lot and sparse buildings, Aaliyah dismounted from Chase's motorcycle, adjusting the bag on her shoulder. He looked at her with concern. "Remember, if anything happens, yell. We'll be nearby." She nodded, trying to steady her breathing. Her heart pounded fiercely, as if trying to escape her chest. Each step on the uneven ground seemed to echo in her mind as she approached an abandoned building where Marcus had instructed her to go. She scanned her surroundings, finding no one at first. For a moment she feared it was a hoax or an endless trap. Then she heard footsteps, and as she turned, Marcus emerged from behind a graffiti-covered wall. He looked more disheveled than ever, sunken eyes, rumpled clothes, but his posture, "I'm the one who loses everything if I don't pay those debts. Do you get that?" His voice rose, and Aaliyah took a step back, raising her arm as if to ward him off. Even knowing Chase and the police were nearby, the memories of his past abuses made her sweat. Yet she found the strength to insist, "You have no right to use me as your shield. You're the one who made those debts, who deceived everyone, and dragged me into this without my consent." That was when Marcus snapped. He unleashed a torrent of profanities and lunged at her. Aaliyah barely had time to react before the unmistakable roar of motorcycles filled the air. Within seconds, Chase, Roy, and other members of the motorcycle club appeared, forming a semicircle at the lot's entrance. Marcus froze, confused and enraged. He tried retreating behind the wall, but two plainclothes officers emerged, blocking his escape. "This is the end of the line, Marcus," one officer said, pulling out his badge. "You can make this easier by surrendering." Marcus's fury only grew. He turned to Aaliyah, pointing an accusatory finger. "You traitor! I'll ruin you! You shouldn't have—" Before he could finish, Chase and Roy stepped forward, cutting off any hope of escape. The police moved swiftly, closing in. Marcus, in a last desperate act, charged at Aaliyah as if to grab or hurt her. But Chase intervened, placing himself between them. There was a brief scuffle, and Marcus was tackled to the ground, restrained by the officers who quickly handcuffed him. Aaliyah watched, her heart pounding, caught in a storm of emotions. She saw Marcus subdued, shouting empty threats as the officers led him away. Her hands trembled, and a sudden wave of weakness washed over her, as if all the tension of recent days had crashed down at once. Chase, noticing her unsteady stance, rushed to support her, his hands steadying her shoulders. "It's over," he said gently. Tears streamed down her face as relief overwhelmed her. After so much fear, witnessing Marcus's downfall felt almost surreal. One of the officers nodded in gratitude to the motorcycle club for their cooperation. Watching it all, Aaliyah felt an immense sense of liberation, as though she could finally breathe without the crushing weight of her past. In the days that followed, Aaliyah met with Mauricio at his law office, feeling lighter than she'd ever imagined. With Mauricio's legal assistance, the debts Marcus had fraudulently placed in her name were annulled. It was a victory she had never thought possible. Emerging from the office building, she spotted Chase leaning against his motorcycle, a quiet smile on his face. When he asked how it went, she shared the good news. His grin widened. From there they rode to the cafe where it all began. Co-workers welcomed her with warm embraces, proud that she had stood up to Marcus. The manager, once intimidated by Marcus's presence, offered unwavering support, even suggesting connections with labor lawyers if needed. Aaliyah laughed, amazed at how natural it felt to smile again. At the end of her shift, she hung up her apron, feeling lighter than ever. Glancing at her reflection in a nearby window, she saw someone transformed. Then Chase appeared, inviting her on a spontaneous motorcycle trip to celebrate. "I think we could both use a little getaway," he said, grinning. "You especially." She hesitated, laughing nervously. "I never imagined taking a trip like this, but maybe it's time to try." Minutes later, she emerged with a small backpack and a newfound spark in her eyes. Climbing onto Chase's motorcycle, she felt a rush of freedom. As the engine roared and the bike took off, Aaliyah embraced him tightly, laughing, a mix of relief and exhilaration. The city faded into the distance, and the open road stretched before them. With the wind on her face and the sun shining brightly overhead, Aaliyah felt victorious. She thought of every insult, every threat, every moment Marcus had tried to break her, and realized she was finally free. As the motorcycle sped along the highway, the world seemed more vibrant. The blue sky, the trees lining the road, the scent of fresh grass. In that moment, Aaliyah felt herself reconnecting with her essence, ready to dream anew. Behind her lay the chains Marcus had used to imprison her. Beside her was Chase, who saw her not as a victim, but as someone strong enough to rebuild her life. Feeling the wind on her face, Aaliyah gazed at the radiant sun above and smiled, hearing only the engine's hum and the steady beat of her own heart. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen